has no checks, so nice and easy. I can just attack his bishop. Shit. What do I do here? I want the most forcing way. Okay. So let's go back and see what we got. 4 viewers. I did say that was, thanks. I did say that was the magic number that I was waiting for, didn't I? Alright. Profile. Alright, so we're sitting at 21.95. Lost a few points, that's okay. So I got a specific request to do Damiano's defense, and I think I'll just go into that right now. So Damiano's defense it's a pretty famous theory, and you can go to like the Wikipedia article on Damiano's defense and find out pretty much everything that all the functional information that you'll need about Damiano's defense. It's not something that you're going to see, but it's something that it's famous theory. If you're a student of the game, you should be aware of it. And what I'm talking about is after king pawn, e4, e5, white plays knight f3, black is playing f6. And this was a defense that was actually analyzed by Damiano. It was not played by Damiano. He didn't want this named after him. And you can see why. It's kind of an ugly move, but it does make some sense. Like the knight being placed on f3, takes e5 and g5, and then the pawn on f6 is kind of you're meeting the knight. You're taking away both his forward squares. So in order for this knight to be effective, it could come to h4 and try and do something there, but is not as solid as, say, the Slav defense in the Queen's Gambit, because this move is it does not contribute to the development of a piece. In fact, it takes away the best square for this knight on g8, and it exposes a diagonal leading towards black's king side, so it makes the king side less safe. And it doesn't do anything in the fight for d5. So, I mean, altogether, I mean, this is a pretty weak move, and you could plausibly, play. White could play like a Scotch style, open up the center, try and take advantage of the fact this is not it's not a developing move. I mean, it is a move f6 that you would play like in the Rui exchange, but in that opening, I mean, the king's bishop has been traded off, so you don't have to be concerned about the light squirrels that this move is creating. And also just putting the bishop on c4, just good old standard development, asking black what he's going to do with his king, since it's going to take him a while to castle short. But the reason why f6 is regarded bad is because white can embark in a tactical journey by playing knight takes e5, and this has been regarded for a long time as being the solution for Damiano's defense, knight takes on e5. And the justification is that pulling this pawn away from black's king side, it's there's this diagonal for checking. There's no. It's very inconvenient because black has not taken any kind of proper safeguards for his king side. So f takes e5. Although this f takes e5 move is not forced, and perhaps we can look at this later. You can also play it with queen e7. And this is kind of an attempt to not lose a pawn, although there are major drawbacks to queen e7. In fact, one of the most famous games for Damiano's defense was a simul game. It was played in 1964 in Houston between Bobby Fischer with white, who was playing like 50 other boards at the same time, and McGregor as black, who was like an expert or a low-ranked master, I guess. So he wanted to surprise Bobby Fischer into thinking that he was a beginning player by playing f6. So after knight takes e5, we didn't go into black did not accept the piece. We'll take a look at Fischer and McGregor. It continued queen to e7, which is sort of like a Petrov type move. You're countering with the attack on the e file, saying this knight is under attack, and if the knight moves, then we're going to take e4 and equalize the material. So the reason, so I guess one thing we should be aware of here. White can play queen h5. He can play this check, taking advantage of the pin on the h7 pawn. Does anyone know, or has anyone seen this? Do we know how black should respond to this check? What are the legal moves? Black could play g6. He could lose his queen because the knight is hitting f7, or he could go to d8, where if he goes to d8, then this knight check is certain death because he's going to take the rook with check. But in fact, this is not good for white because of the move g6. And although the h pawn is pinned and can't take back, black has queen takes e4, and this is check. And then he's simply going to take back on g6, and white has lost a piece. So queen h5 is a mistake, and white should just retreat the knight. So here the theory is that black should, as opposed to just taking, he should play d5. And the reason is, if takes, then white is going to play bishop to e2. And there's no way to prevent white from, say, castling short and playing rook e1. And so in two moves, you're going to have a major crisis on your hands. There's going to be a rook on e1. Black's king and queen are going to be on the e file. Comparing that to the position after the d pawns have moved, black has a resource that that we're going to see in a little bit. But here, this is just very, very difficult for black. So he's got to say he plugs the e file somehow. He plays like knight e7 and then castles. Now we still have this problem of how the king side gets developed for black, and white is going to take control over the e file, even if he doesn't have any major threats in discovering with this bishop. He can just start filling the center with his pawns. So the reason why d5 is better is because this threatens just to take the pawn, and if white plays d3, then after D, queen takes D. Now we have the additional resource here that the D pawns are gone, and this allows black to play bishop to F5 to attack C2. So after bishop E2, bishop F5. And now black is, his position lacks fundamental soundness. He's made a pawn move around his king, he's taken a square away from this knight, and he's put his major pieces on the file that white is going to be able to get to first. But all of that, you still have to answer for the fact that black is, threatening to take a pawn. And in Fischer-McGregor, Bobby Fischer played knight d4, which seems sensible enough. It attacks the bishop on f5, it protects c2. I mean, it does move a piece again, but there are good points to this move. And that Simul game actually, it was a draw. McGregor was able to draw Fischer in the Simul using the Damiano defense. Now, as we'll see, that doesn't mean that the defense is good, but so I think, what were the next moves in that game? I think black actually played knight c6, not caring if this bishop can be exchanged, as it helps black to develop his rook to the d file. But let's look at a better move instead. Fischer had better than knight d4. Instead, knight c3, gaining a tempo on the queen right away and allowing black to win a pawn. This is very strong, and we'll look at a couple lines here. So what happens if black gobbles this pawn? He takes, and then white exchanges. So black is up a pawn, but we've got, white has 3 pieces in play. He can get castled very quickly. Black has 1 piece in play. He's got this this bishop on c2, which is rather exposed. Can be attacked by a knight moving into d4, and so also threatening to come into e6 at the same time. Can be attacked by a rook coming to c1. So this is it's a difficult position. So it was actually white's move here after bishop takes, and now just the immediate knight d4 is good. And so this bishop is kind of short on squares. So really, bishop g6 is the only move here. And now bishop f4, just the evaluation of this position is it is an extremely effective gambit. I mean, they say that a pawn is worth 3 developing moves. I guess that's a guideline that someone came up with a while ago. And white has 4 pieces in play to black's 1, and there's all sorts of short-term problems. Like, this pawn is hanging, this knight can go to b5, white can castle and get his rook on the d file, this other rook can come to the e file. White just has a very, very lucid, free game. It's so yeah, this is why the knight c3 is stronger than knight d4, which preserves the material. But again, when you get here, knight c3, allowing black to take on c2, then the knight comes in, and then bishop f4. So in addition, how do you even guard this? Like, pawn to c6, keeping knights off of d5 and b5. And then, say I haven't analyzed this, can we continue with the knight coming to e6? So this threatens the exchange fork. And black can't guard it with his king because his bishop is hanging. So I don't think that. I mean, would anybody here like to take black's position, being up a pawn after bishop f4? I'm guessing probably not. All right, so let's go back a while. So that is that's the theory of the move queen e7. Playing it like a Petrov's, but so having to use your queen to take e4. It's a bit dubious. I mean, even if we were like this, right? Queen to e7. I mean, it's proper just to kick this knight back with d6 and then take. But you do see this sometimes, and it's not. Well, here I guess white can play d4, and then after d6 coming back. And I guess people do play this, but it's pretty clear White's going to play in the same way. He's going to castle short. He's going to put his rook on the e file, and ask Black what he's doing with if he has enough time to move his queen, shield the e file, get castled, without dropping the bishop on his head. Of course, here it seems Opening Explorer is telling us there's bishop f5 and that same tactic, with the counterattack on c2. But here there's better choices available to White, because we don't have. We could just move the c pawn here. I mean, knight c3 is probably not as good because if Black takes, there's no knight d4 at the end. But so the top move here is c4, and that makes a lot of sense to me because preparing knight c3, kicking this queen away, and for bishop e7, White castle. The only moves here are with White castle. But what happens if White just plays knight c3 here? So think the Black queen can go over to the king side, but then there's a discovered attack. The discovered attack doesn't really do anything though. It is allowing Black to chop on g2. So perhaps after queen g4, maybe we just castle here. Castle which guards g2. And then castle guarding g2, and then this knight e5 move is always going to be in the position, unless Black spends another tempo move in the queen. I guess we could also play queen c2. This seems a bit. It forces a queen exchange, because this queen can't run anywhere, but Black is investing an awful lot of time to do this. So, if we just castle here. So it's a position with equal material, but White's got a good pawn center. He controls space. He plays bishop out to f4, rook to c1, and complete development that way. Maybe just try and gain some space on the queen side. So I mean, nothing major going on here, but still fairly pleasant. I'm wondering if this. No, probably shouldn't do this because I do have to watch out for this bishop coming to d3 and the c4 pawn dropping. I was wanting to play bishop in order to get the bishop to a4 or b3 because the bishop is not doing a whole lot right now besides blocking the e file. I think we're getting too far off on a tangent here. So that's the Petrov with queen e7. And the Damiano with queen e7 has got to be worse. You've got pawn f6 instead of knight f6. And your d pawn is still at d7, so you're not as developed as you would be. All right, so that was queen e7, which gives white a pleasant position without investing. He invests a pawn if he goes in to take c2. Other than that, not investing much. But here, white is investing a piece, and the only compensation for the piece is the weakening of the king's field. So, critical move, queen h5 check. Attacking the king, attacking the e5 pawn. And there are two legal moves here. If black is a beginner, you'll probably see g6, but I think it's more critical for black to play king e7 and try and force white to demonstrate that he knows what to do with the extra piece. Just g6 real quick, the answer is queen takes e5, check, and hanging the rook in the corner. And you can try and trap the queen if you want to, but you really can't. There's no way to trap the queen in time if white is playing at all alert. Queen e7, queen takes h8, and the queen is already threatening to take the knight on g8. Yeah. So, I mean, either you could timidly guard it with big queen to f7, or you can take here. And after queen takes, really I think the best move is for white to voluntarily move the king. And that frees up e1 for the rook. Again, black's king is going to be trapped in the center for the foreseeable future. This knight's hanging. This is just a total disaster for black. And this queen is nowhere close to being trapped on h8. So, I don't know, shall I even show this what happens here? Queen f7. So queen f7, I mean, you're not threatening bishop g7 because the h7 pawn is on free. If black were just allowed to castle here, like if you were allowed to play d6, knight c6, bishop d7 and castles, then he would possibly be threatening bishop h6, knight g8. But I mean, that's a ton of moves. That's like 8 moves just to be able to attack white's queen in the corner. And so, I think knight c3, just my concept is to swing the bishop out to b5 and then come back to b3. But I want to make sure that this pawn is guarded first, and the knight being able to come to d5 might also be. I guess why couldn't white just play the bishop to b5 right away? I don't know, probably could, but hey, knights prefer bishops. That is what they say. So let's look at king e7 now. So black is not interested in losing an exchange. He wants to play king e7. And obviously queen takes e5 check, king f7. So keep in mind, white is down a piece. So, but there's this king on f7 is in a lot of trouble. So it's got no moves except to snake out to g6 and come over here to a very dangerous territory. Being across from this bishop. So really, black is almost mated, but he's not. A misconception about this opening is that there is a forced mate, and there is not a forced mate. I'm going to show how black can play this and survive, but it's, again, it's still objectively not very good. So bishop c4, developing a piece, giving check, and black's only move here is to throw away another pawn and play d5. The move d5 develops the queen's bishop and controls some squares that black desperately needs controlled. What happens if he just moves the king? King g6. Does anyone here want to suggest moves for white? Or anyone here has seen this theory before? I'll play the first move for you, because the first move is pretty easy. Queen f5 check. And this king only has one square. It's got to go over here to the edge of the board, in front of all his guys. Now, black has almost made it here, right? But there's some precision that is still needed. We have this bishop that's pointing at the king. Do we want to play this discovered check right away, or do we want to do something else first? Also, why doesn't it clear errors when I left click? Like it does when I'm actually playing. So, curious. Okay, now I said precision is needed here. Maybe it's not. I mean, I think that d3 check still wins, but the move I want to show, may not make sense at all at first because it's not a check, and it controls a square near black's king that we're already controlling. But the best move here is h4. And the reason is that you got to ask yourself, what is black doing? If it were black's move, how would he try to escape all this malarkey? Well, all these pieces are locked out of play, right? And probably black wants to play either the pawn to g6 or the pawn to g5. To free up the square, g7, for the king to come to. Because if black's king were to come to g7, he has some defense around him. The knight's controlling f6 and h6. The rook is controlling the h-file. I mean, you still have to worry about f7. But, nobody's perfect. But yeah, this is where. Sorry. So black wants to be able to, free up g7 for the king, and then g5 will block the bishop check as well, and it's supported by the queen. But to move h4, it's a prophylactic move. It anticipates black playing g5, because if black were to play g5, then the h takes, and now we involve the rook on h1 in the mating attack. So with this rook playing, the rook, queen, and the bishop, we really have mate very soon. So after, say, queen e7, this is the best move because it prevents black from getting checkmated on f7. Because we know that the black king's got to get driven back to g7. So we need to be able to prevent queen f7 mate for black. And the stiffest resistance is queen e7. But still, look at another move here. What about d5? Temporarily, cutting the bishop off and attacking the queen. So, at least this provides some opportunity for black to win the game. And if we take here, this would be a blunder clearly. But no, we want to continue the attack on the black king and play d3 check, unleashing the queen's bishop. And this king has no squares. The only move, well, queen g5 is obvious maiden one. So g5 first, right? And now, what do you think the best move is here for white? I realize I have notation available, but pretend you didn't see that. I mean, it's very tempting to play h takes check, right? Unleashing the power of the rook right away, getting double check. Double checks are quite powerful, as they say. But unfortunately, king g7, and now white is not able to deliver mate with queen to f7. So he's got, and really what's going on here, he's got, black's attacking the queen, black's attacking the bishop. Black is controlling most of the squares around his own king. I mean, white doesn't lose here, I think. Maybe queen e5 check, and followed by bishop takes is very strong. But this is not, it's not as strong as it could have been. Well, the problem was that we were able to come back to g7, and from g7, we're controlling most of the squares. G7 is a fairly safe square for the black king, but if we throw in queen f7 first, for the sole purpose of stopping black from coming back with the king, well, now we're threatening bishop g5. We're threatening to take g5. This is going to be mate very soon, because there's no squares for the king, and this g5 can't be defended, because when white takes it will be double check. So again, remember that move, queen to f7, forbidding the black king from coming back to g7, and only then delivering mate. So that was d5. Queen e7, a better defense, which again, it's preventing queen f7. It's preventing any mates on f7 and preparing black to play, g5 or g6 followed by king g7. But what happens here? d3 check, and then g5, and now what? Do we want to take and give double check right away? Or maybe do something else? Well, I mean, when we give double check, this king is going to go back to g7, right? And we can't attack him with queen f7 mate. So how do we attack him? How will we attack the black king when it comes to g7? Well, imagine that this bishop were to come to c3, right? Because then, after this pawn takes with double check, we'd be protecting f6 3 times with the queen, the pawn, and the bishop. So black would not be able to stall mate by blocking on f6. Notice, in this case, it was important for white to play d3 check as opposed to d4. Most of the time it doesn't matter, but here we need this additional resource of being able to come to go on diagonal. So h4, again, preparing to meet any kind of g5 with takes double check is the winning move in this position. Keep that in mind because it will come up in our main line. So after bishop c4, the bishop has just given check, and having seen the forced mate that will happen on king g6, black decides to invest another pawn in his own safety. So after bishop takes d5, and I guess, technically we could forestall mate for a very long time by sacrificing our queen, but let's say that black is really trying to make white demonstrate the most accurate play and prove that he can win, with his attack at the cost of a piece. King g6, most critical move. And here, the best move for white to continue the attack, very familiar looking move, is h4. Again, the king has not been driven to h6 yet, because unlike the previous line, black actually controls f5. But with h4, we're introducing the possibility of advancing h5, given check, which would force the king over to h6, a square where we could deliver discovered check. So h4, and if black is at all interested in, oh wait, that time it cleared. Why is it sometimes clear and sometimes not? A mystery has yet to be solved. Anyway, yeah, so if black is at all interested in the welfare of his king, he needs to make Luft. No, wait, that's an inappropriate term, because black isn't on the back rank, but he needs to make a cubbyhole for himself, right? And the best move is h5. I mean, it's also possible to play h6, but I believe h5 is a little bit better because it provides two squares, potentially, for the black king to go to. And also, with h6, you're allowing the additional possibility that white may simply play h5 and try and force the black king to go to h7 and nail him into a coffin, where we can continue to attack the g6 square. But h5, a little bit more resilient. I mean, it's weakens g5, but there's no without a knight that can be played there. It'll take a while before that weakness can be felt. So here, so what is, it's not immediately obvious. Maybe you can see it if you're looking at the notation. And perhaps I should have saved this study in puzzle form. But, the right move is bishop takes e7. There's really no way for white to force mate here. So the next best thing is we attack e7, and we're threatening to take the rook, and trying to make use of the fact that the bishop on c8 is beholden to the f5 square. So say the bishop takes here, right? This checkmate should look familiar. Queen f5 check, and forcing the king to go to h6. Keep in mind, if this pawn were back on h6, this would be checkmate already. But the pawn being on h5 takes a little bit longer. King h6, d3 check, g5, and now a familiar motif. Queen f7, stopping king g7, and we're getting ready to play. We're getting ready to play check. H takes g check, and whatever black does next, rook takes. Will be checkmate, because there will be a pin on whatever piece is taking g5. So the bishop on b7 cannot be taken. The best move here is to play bishop to d6. And again, some sources that I've seen, after bishop takes b7, they just have black playing bishop takes b7 without comment, and then they show the forced mate, and then that's it. So that's why some people think that the Damiano defense is just a forced mate. But no, what about bishop d6? So what's going on here? Black is developing a piece, attacking the queen. There's really no convenient checks on the black king, is there? Does anyone have any suggestions for moves? Queen should probably go somewhere, right? How about? Well, definitely don't want to trade queens. So then black would just trade queens and then take our bishop. So this bishop's got to go. Or his queen's got to go all the way over to a5. Now, if bishop takes b7, then the queen comes back to f5 and we deliver the same checkmate. It doesn't matter that this bishop is now on d6. But knight c6. Again, attacking the white queen, so it's kind of a forcing move. We don't have time to take this rook. There's nowhere that we can go to check black's king. So forced move, bishop takes. And now black, seeing that his rook is attacked, just moves the rook. So what has happened here? I mean, the knight came over to c6 and we just took it, right? And we were already down a knight. So by taking that knight, we've now, the pieces are now even. However, the pawns are not. We've managed to grab 4 pawns along the way. So how did we get here? So we grab pawn number 1 here. We grab pawn number 2 here. We grab pawn number 3 here. We grab pawn number 4 here, right? And now knight c6. So we sacrifice the knight to get this, but now the knight comes back. And now black moves the rook. So it's white's move here, and we have this variation is sometimes known as the 5-pawn gambit, because white is able to take on a7 here. So this is five entire pawns to the good for white. But is that where the story ends? Can we stop evaluating here, saying white is up the equivalent of a rook? Of course he's going to win. Or maybe are there some practical issues here? Like say we play, say black plays rook to b6, attacking the bishop. And then we defend the bishop, and then maybe knight f6. So yeah, there's 5 pawns, 5 pawns advantage to white, but almost all the black pieces are in play. Like if this rook comes to e or f, well, not e. If this rook comes to f, and then this king were to come away, the black king would be safe because white doesn't have any developed pieces. He can't continue to attack the black king. So, black gets his rook in play, and every black piece is active. And then where's white go with the king? He's got several moves before he can castle long. And even if he castles long, he's got sort of his queen sitting in front of the pawns where they're going to need to protect the king. Castling short, I mean, that would be fine, except for the fact that we've got this pawn on h4. And having moved the pawn on h4, there's no way to stop a knight from going into g4 except by playing f3. And playing f3, we've strengthened the bishop on d6. So yeah, I mean, a computer would, I think, be able to win this quite easily. But I mean, the 5-pawn gambit. What do you guys think of the 5-pawn gambit? I mean, in a rapid game, would you play black? Alright, I think I've lost a couple of my viewers, but they probably left when I showed the Damiano defense. Anyway, so after so what happens here if instead of taking pawn number 5, because how many pawns up do we need really? What about just knight c3 here? Like knight c3 getting developed, and perhaps without allowing this. Keeping the queen somewhat active on a5 as compared to the queen being on a7 and then having to come back to a4. Because one move that we might consider throwing in is queen to g5. Giving back another pawn, but being able to trade the queens off. So perhaps if we play d3 first, we wouldn't even have to give up a pawn. We could play d3 and then queen g5. Trade off queens in a position where we're up multiple pawns. So yeah, that's my official suggestion for white is in this position after rook b8. Don't take pawn number 5. Just play knight c3. Develop piece. Potentially this knight could come to be near the black king, and on g3 it provides e2 or g3, or maybe even coming to e3 and providing another defender near white's king side. So yeah, that is to recap. So the Damiano defense is f6. After knight takes, it's possible to play queen e7, but more critical is taking back. And in this position, bishop c4, it's forced that black play d5 here. And the king comes to g6, where despite what you might think, there's no forced mate here. h4 is the best move for white. h5 is the best response for black. And then I guess you could also play queen g3. That is an alternative, but bishop b7 wins queen material. It's hard to resist that. After bishop d6, which is, again, this is a forced move because we can't take back because of mate starting with queen f5. Bishop d6, queen f5, knight c6. Again, this is forced because otherwise we're losing the rook for nothing. Knight c6 gives back a knight, but we're not losing the rook. And after rook b8, the 5-pawn gambit would be queen takes a7. Where white is up 5 pawns. It suffers some coordination issues, but I think that the coordination is better after knight c3. So yeah, that was my presentation on the Damiano defense. All right, so that will probably be a highlight for YouTube. Since no one else is really talking in chat at the moment, I'm not going to move on.